This generation who endured the Japanese occupation, to those who risked their lives for our freedom, to those who continue to protect our freedom and keep our island safe, we thank you. To the people of Guam, our viewers and generous supporters, happy Liberation Day from PBS Guam KGTF Channel 12. Catch the 3-part special program 77th Guam Liberation Village to Village We Are Survivors on demand on PBS Guam's YouTube page.
Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Some federal workers told they must be corona vaccinated. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Healthcare providers employed by the Veterans Administration being told to get the shot.
Veteran Affairs is going to, in fact, require that all docs working in facilities are going to have to be vaccinated.
The president speaking with reporters at the White House Monday. Under the order, workers who resist could face penalties, including being removed from patient care positions. The American Medical Association is calling on all healthcare facilities to require their workers to get the coronavirus vaccine. The state of California and the city of New York announcing similar orders for their government workers. They do not make exception for employees who've had the virus and now have natural immunity. Dr. Marty McCary at Johns Hopkins University tells Fox News at Night he thinks that's a mistake.
Remember, we can only push the fire alarm so many times in public health. And when you look at this sort of blanket support for mandates, be it masks or vaccines, despite natural immunity, it's really ignoring a lot of the science out there.
The mission of U.S. forces in Iraq is about to change.
As Iranian-backed Shia militias keep firing rockets at U.S. troops in the American embassy, President Biden announced America's combat operations in Iraq are coming to an end. The announcement came at the request of Iraq's prime minister, who visited the White House today. But unlike in Afghanistan, President Biden plans to keep the current number of 2,500 U.S. troops on the ground to train, advise, and assist their Iraqi partners to make sure ISIS does not return. Iran and its proxy forces are calling for a full American withdrawal.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. At the Summer Olympic Games, Naomi Osaka is out of the women's singles tournament, ranked number 2 among women's tennis players. She's lost to Marketa Vondrousova of the Czech Republic in a third-round match. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
The House Select Committee on the January 6th Capitol riot will hold its first hearing Tuesday with some Capitol Hill police officers testifying. Only 2 Republicans are on the committee, both appointed by Speaker Pelosi, neither a fan of former President Trump. Talks on a $1 trillion infrastructure bill continue, now under a threat from the Senate Majority Leader that he could delay their August recess. Senate Minority Leader McConnell on the Senate floor Monday warned the U.S. economy is at risk because of massive spending plans.
The end of June clocked the highest annual inflation spike in more than a decade. The Democrats' stay-home bonus to workers who remain unemployed has slowed the recovery and helped keep workforce participation stagnant.
And McConnell says Democrats' efforts to defund police have resulted in a 25% increase in murders nationwide. But there's still no crime bill in sight.
After a shooting killed one.
The crime scourge grips U.S. cities, and Americans demand solutions. Yet there are few plans to combat crime in cities controlled by Democrats. Congressional Democrats resist writing a comprehensive crime bill, even as they spend trillions elsewhere. There's concern that the defund the police narrative contributes to the current crime wave. Republicans believe police fear to do their jobs properly as crime spikes. And that's why bipartisan police reform is stalled again. Some Democrats believe the crime surge will force the hand of their party, which controls Congress.
Fox's Chad Pergram at the Capitol. In Fort Worth, Texas, a group of partygoers takes the law into their own hands and stones a gunman to death.
After a shooting killed one and wounded two others. The shooter apparently left a backyard party, returned, and argued with other partygoers before the shooting began. A group from the party gave chase. The gunman either fell or was knocked down, then was hit with landscaping bricks, which ended up killing him.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Sir Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Mezcla, read all about it. Check out Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tuman for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tuman, Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, starting out with the Daily News, it's not exactly a dynamic editorial today. Our view, Salvation Army provides valuable lifeline through economic devastation. The Salvation Army and other charity groups have played a big role in helping people get through the economic and emotional devastation caused by the pandemic. Nationally, last year, the Salvation Army provided more than 225 million meals and 1.76 million nights of shelter. As people are faced with job loss and income reduction and mounting bills, families have had to make difficult choices. This issue, pandemic poverty, is having a profound effect on the stability of American families, the Salvation Army notes on its website. On Guam, Salvation Army workers noticed a spike in requests for help between May and June this year, which they attributed to delays in food stamps and pandemic unemployment assistance. If that's the case, some families could be in trouble when these economic lifelines end or change. Right now, the pantry is in emergency disaster service mode, which means everyone who needs assistance qualifies, including clients on food stamps or public unemployment assistance. Clients can collect one bag a month, which provides enough people to feed a family of 5 or 10 people. But pandemic condition of readiness 4 is declared. The pantry will change its operation and employ stricter methods of eligibility. While the government has done a great job of managing the Wuhan virus crisis on the island, a good job? Maybe, yeah. The federal government has provided the vaccines we need to achieve herd immunity. Our economic future relies on more than our island and our nation. We cannot recover until tourism recovers, and that will depend on the pace of recovery and vaccination in our tourism source markets. In discussing the closure of Red Lobster Monday, Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association President Mary Rhodes said it's been hard for restaurants to stay open during the pandemic. Businesses have been trying to stay afloat, but it's been difficult, especially when their models rely on the tourist industry, Rhodes said. Although we've seen an increase in business from local community, it's rather difficult to replace tourism spending. The tourism industry represented 60% of our gross domestic product. 60%. Until employers are able to recover, lifelines like the Salvation Army Food Pantry will be important resources for the people of Guam. So let's have a big cheer for the Salvation Army, Jose.
That's not really the percentage that hurt restaurants on Guam, but I digress.
Okay. Moving on to the Post. Guam needs better foresight to avoid inconveniencing the public. Now, that's a radical idea. When has it ever been?
Only now?
Yeah. When has it ever been something that we would expect from the government to not inconvenience the public? On Sunday evening, the governor's office issued a press release announcing the lifting of the requirement of island residents to show proof of resident. Oh, wait a minute. On Sunday evening, the governor's office issued a press release? No.
It came to life.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Yeah, it was an anthropomorphic office. You'd never know it, but if you were up if you were down in Adelup, you would have seen it striding around and talking.
When the governor is away, the office will play.
Exactly. So I wonder, is this deliberate or just sloppiness? On Sunday night, the governor's office. And of course, there was, on Sunday evening, the lieutenant governor issued a press release announcing the lifting of requirement for island residents to show proof of residence from their village mayor as part of the application process for the pandemic cash aid authorized under the Recovery Income Support and Empowerment Act, or the RISE Act. Again, not correct. That's not what the authorization was. This law could put one-time pandemic cash assistance into the pockets of island residents whose adjusted gross income last tax filing year did not exceed $40,000 for a single or $80,000 for a couple. On one hand, it's good that the government of Guam has done away with requiring residents to show proof they are registered in their village. Instead of requiring a piece of paper, the Department of Rev Tax will be calling the mayor's office to verify the aid program's applicant's residency. We do agree that applicants should be vetted to verify they live in the village they claim. But we also welcome the change that eliminates the need to a trip to the mayor's office and wait, often in a long line, depending on the size of the village, to get this one-page document. It seems sometimes that the mission of the government is to see how many people it can make stand in line for how long. You know, rev tax being a chronic example. Prior to the removal of the proof of residence requirement, RevTax also simplified the requirement by deciding to accept a previously issued verification as long as it wasn't too dated. And on Sunday, the governor's office, under the watch of the acting governor, Joshua Tenorio, issued a press release that the requirement was not needed after all. So the governor and Jim Moylan and some other senators keep playing volleyball with this whole RISE Act, RISE program. If the governor doesn't want to do something, she says, well, the RISE Act won't allow me to do it. And if she does want to do something, she says, the RISE Act doesn't apply to me because it's money coming from the national government. So the RISE Act said you got to get a verification from your village commissioner. Josh Tenorio's press release says you don't need no stinking verification. So a new chapter in government documentation. The rule is if there is statutory lacunae, that is, if there is a space between what is covered by two statutes, the governor can fill the hole with an executive order. Or if there's no law on point, the governor can write an executive order. But we've got something new now. We've got statute, executive order, and press release, government by press release. 3 weeks have passed since island residents in the most populated villages, Dededo, Ojigo, and Tamuning, took time to go to their mayor's office, fill out a form, and wait to get that piece of paper showing their village residency. And the RISE Act application process hasn't even opened yet. Residents must also apply for the cash aid authorized by the RISE Act, which the governor relabeled as the All Rise program after including GovGuam employees and retirees. She not only relabeled it, she replaced it. It doesn't get paid automatically, unlike the Economic Impact Payment Programs process, according to guidance previously released by RevTax. The first version of the RISE Act program excluded, it's not the RISE Act program, it was the RISE Act. And no wonder the senators are confused. Even the papers keep saying it wrong. Excluded government workers and focused on private sector workers, many of whom lost their jobs in the pandemic or took pay cuts. The idea was to help only the private sector workforce because the entire GovGuam labor force did not have to take pay cuts or go through furloughs. Many in GovGuam payroll still got paid while at home for months during the pandemic. And for some pay periods last year, Power and Water Agency employees got double pay, costing millions of dollars. The government of Guam has capped the All Rise program. No. At $30 million, so the amount each qualified resident can get will vary depending on how many will apply and qualify. The previous estimates have ranged from around 500 to 800 per person. For many who have taken their time to get a document that will no longer be required, that's time and risk of Wuhan virus exposure among a crowd they can no longer get back. There must be a way for residents who have already taken the time to get this document to be first to be considered for the cash aid payment. Why? If all of their other documentation, requisite information checks out. It's good that the requirement has been lifted, but it also serves as a reminder that GovGuam does need to do better foresight when it comes to decisions that make the wheels of bureaucracy even squeakier. I don't know what your source of information here is, Guam Daily Post, but you ought to be listening to Tall Tales because I'm going to go into this on the card. And after I'm done explaining it, maybe you'll understand the RISE Act and the All Rise program as not being close to being the same thing.
I have an idea who assisted them with this, especially since they worked very hard in not naming our governor in this op-ed at all, or editorial at all. You don't see her name anywhere.
Nowhere.
Zero.
True enough, yeah.
There was a caller who had asked a question or wanted to clarify about why we need these village verifications anyways, and I think you might address that in the card.
Well, I think, I don't, but I think the reason was that the theory was that you had to live on Guam in order to be eligible for either the RISE Act or the All Rise program.
Yeah, because he was mentioning that he's already filled out many applications that already required him to have a verification that RevTax already has, including the Guam ID.
Yeah, the real ID.
The real ID.
Yeah, which ought to be proof positive for anybody, right? Yeah. But I think that's the reason that, and the risk of someone who doesn't live here, you know, applying for that is somewhere between slim and none. It would have to be someone visiting relatives, one of the rare tourists that cycles through the island.
Well, let me throw a wrench into this. This discussion. I think one thing that people are reluctant to say is that this might be a racial action, because there are a number of people not from Guam that have multiple people living in a house, and sometimes it's easy to deny some people residency if there's too many people living in one house. I've seen it happen.
I see.
I think that's one way of doing that. But that's the unsaid thing, and I think that bears exploring some more.
And then, of course, there's always a possibility, or not a possibility, we've got to make sure that no military or military dependents apply for this, right?
Then it's kind of all rise.
I mean, these are probably the thought, because when I heard about it, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. When they first came out with the Real ID, one of the things that the Real ID requires, in addition to proof of citizenship, you actually have to prove that you live at the address that you show on your Real ID. So, of course, how are we going to do that? Well, send everybody over to the closed mayor's office, you know, because you never know what's going to be open, and make them stand in line and let somebody at the mayor's office fumble around to figure out some way to verify their address. Now, how the mayor's office would know where I live? You know, I go in and tell the mayor's office, my address is 123 Easy Street. Oh, okay. How do you spell easy? And they put it on a piece of paper and give it to me, and then I take it down there. And this is proof.
What usually is proof is a billing.
Well, that was the second thing. The first was go to the mayor's office, right? And then after that, they came up with a power bill or a water bill, which probably is better. Except I know a lot of people get their mail at somebody else's house. I know several people. This has historical roots. Over 50 years ago, a lot of people got their mail at the fire station. This was before we had home delivery.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you'd go over to the fire station and pick up your mail. Okay, so much for the card for today. And here's what we've got. I'm so much for the Jemmy Cutney for today. We start out with the governor versus cluelessness. Same subject as the editorial. And then we've got more Tall Tales versus Melvin Borja. And we've got Candid News versus Matson. And Maud Marin versus CRT. This is national. So, we've got a story that ran in PNC. As senators try to amend RISE, governor says it's an executive program and hence veto. A couple days ago, we had, this was yesterday, yeah. Moylan, governor is inconsistent on RISE program. So let's start with that. Senator James Moylan, also known as James Flip-Flop Moylan, has reacted to Governor Leon Guerrero's statement that the RISE program is an executive department program, saying that the governor is inconsistent in her statements with regards to the RISE program. The governor is picking and choosing when the RISE Act is considered an executive program when it's a law passed by the legislature. That's it. A week ago, she made it abundantly clear that she could not make any changes to the plan since it was, quote, set in law. And today she changed her tune, just as she did when she modified the eligibility provision by executive order. Well, Jim, she didn't modify the eligibility provision in the RISE Act. The RISE Act is something the legislature did. The All Rise program is not something the legislature did. Okay, as for the authorized $30 million, Moylan said that while the governor's fiscal team may have recommended that amount to the legislature in 2020, the governor has forgotten that she modified the eligibility programs for the program last month. Well, ACT program. Hence, with government employees and retirees now qualified, the $30 million may not be enough. This is a concern, the senator said. Well, Senator, then it's a concern dealing with the governor's program created by executive order. And we have an anomaly here. We have an anomaly where ordinarily, if you match a statute against an executive order, the statutes trump. Ordinarily. Not this time, because of a case that I mentioned repeatedly called Wong versus Kamina, which was decided by the district court back in 1978, that says that money appropriated by the Congress, if it doesn't require anything on the part of the local government and contains no conditions specifying therefore, does not involve the legislature. Comes to the governor, and the legislature can have no impact on how it's spent. Now, maybe it shouldn't be that way. Maybe we don't like it. But unfortunately, that's the way it is. So when Moylan says, hence with the government employees and retirees now qualified, well, it's not now qualified. Qualified in the All Rise program. The $30 million may not be enough. This is a concern. Well, Jim Moylan, then write another one of your letters. You know, you're kind of the St. Paul of the legislature. Right? You know, give the Corinthians a break and write another one of your daily letters. By the way, you know, when you ran for legislature, you said you wanted to enact laws. You weren't just looking for a pen pal. So write another one of your letters to the legislature saying, Governor, you have limited payments under your RISE Act, All Rise program to $30 million. I respectfully request that you increase it so that you don't run out of money before you run out of applicants. Moylan said the public hearings this week on the RISE program, no, they're not on the RISE program, are an opportunity for the administration to discuss these issues with the legislature. I wouldn't spend 2 minutes discussing this with you, Jim, or anybody else who's as dense as you are that can't figure out the difference between a statute and an executive order in light of Wong versus Kamina. I would not waste my time. Meanwhile, Speaker Therese Terlahi said she continues to remain vigilant about getting this aid out to the people that it was originally intended to assist. Well, being vigilant and keeping your mouth shut, I guess, is better than Jim Moylan. She goes on to say the All Rise program was created by executive order, which is why I have been urging the administration to streamline the process through executive order. I'm encouraged by the acting governor's willingness to finally work toward addressing the urgency of these payments, the speaker said. Well, at least here it shows she gets it. That you can amend the statute all day long and it's not going to make any difference. But then she goes on to say, public hearings are scheduled this week on bills that would amend the RISE Act. I look forward to input from the public on these proposals. Well, I suppose that's a safe thing to say, but the bills actually don't go anywhere. Can't go anywhere. Okay, then we've got the story that ran on PNC see, the same day. Yeah, PNC could have combined these in one story, but they probably didn't get the press release on time. The legislature will hold public hearings on two measures pertaining to the RISE payments that seek to increase the payouts and remove the cap on funding.
Somebody else enters the ring.
Say again?
RISE Act, RISE Program, RISE Payments.
No, they're not going to take a chance on getting it wrong this time, right?
Right.
It'll just be RISE payments. But Governor Lulian Guerrero says the All Rise Act, is a program of the executive department and that she will stick with a $30 million cap allotted for the program. Well, there you go. It's a grant. It's amount that we have looked at through, and we're sticking by that $30 million because I know that when Senator Regine, as you were raging, Biscoe-Lee did that, she worked, I think, with our fiscal people to give more confidence that the $30 million would be sufficient. The governor said from Washington in an interview with News Talk K57's Patty Royal on Monday morning. Okay, well, now Jim can pick up on this, but it's not wrong to say I'm relying on the $30 million that Lee put in her bill because I'm proceeding on the basis that she worked with BBMR and the Director of Administration when she arrived at that amount. So if that amount is correct, the fact that the law doesn't limit her to it, it's legitimate to say I'm going to stick with that. Not so legitimate after you've added more people to the payout under your executive order. She added, and remember that the limit here is $40,000 income levels for individuals and $80,000 for joint filers. So not everybody is going to be eligible for this. Well, gosh, we've known that. We've known that since the get-go. The governor also hinted that she will veto any legislative attempt to increase the payouts or the funding cap on the RISE program. No, they're not amending the RISE program. They just can't get it right. We are the authority and we have the administrative capability to implement our program in any way that we want, and we are implementing it in a very efficient and streamlined process, Leon Guerrero said. It's our program and we're going to do it the way we want to, and the hell with you guys, is basically what she's saying. According to the governor, they created their own RISE program, which is right, because they realized the impediments that have resulted from the original RISE Act passed by the legislature. It's fair. That's right.
That was Abbott and Costello, Bob. They want their act back.
Yeah. Who's on first? Which is the act?
I don't know. It's an antelope.
Yeah. Where's the who's on first? Who's got the program?
What's the act?
Second base. Yeah, I guess the senators at the time didn't, or Laurel and Hardy, with Jim Moylan playing the part of Stan Laurel.
There you go.
He's built for it, right? He sang to lose Stan Laurel. Now see what a fine mess you've gotten us into, Ollie.
This is the worst campaign strategy we've ever been through.
Really. Yeah, so then another quote from the governor. I guess the governors at the time didn't realize, didn't really see the consequences of what they'd passed in terms of the rules and regulations. And so now they're going to try to fix that. But my thinking and my discussions and our decision with the lieutenant governor, myself and other members of our cabinet that are, she didn't major in public speaking, did she?
Zero.
And other members of the cabinet are addressing this. The All Rise program is a program of the executive branch. We want to make sure that it's smooth, and so the verification from the mayor is not going to be required before they apply. The governor said they've already sent out letters to the mayors, Rev Tax, and Speaker Terlahi on how to streamline the application process, which she said is set to begin on the second or third week of August.
It gets better and better.
It does. All right, let's take a short break here and we'll come back to this mess.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
To the greatest generation who endured the Japanese occupation, to those who risked their lives for our freedom, to those who continue to protect our freedom and keep our island safe, we thank you. To the people of Guam, our viewers, and generous supporters, happy Liberation Day from PBS Guam KGTF Channel 12. Catch the three-part special program 77th Guam Liberation Village to Village We Are Survivors on demand on PBS Guam's YouTube page.
Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Here we go. Back to Abbott and Costello. Who's on first, right? The governor said they have already sent letters to the mayors, the Department of Rev Tax, and Speaker Terlahi on how to streamline the application process, which he said is set to begin on the second or third week of August. This would be the application process for the non-existing RISE Act, apparently, because as she told us, it's all hers. So if she wants to borrow the application process in the statute, nothing stops her. If she wants to change it, fine-tune it, simplify it, as she has told us so many times, it's her, not their prerogative. Going on, with regard to the suggestion from the legislature that she utilize American Rescue Plan money to fund the RISE program, the governor reiterated that she still needs to get the final guidelines on the American Rescue Plan money. I don't want to do a program and then later the federal government is going to tell me that it's not an eligible program. So I wanted to make sure we clear that before we actually implement the program. And that's why I'm very adamant. Can you be very adamant?
Just, it's like 2 exclamation points.
Yeah, I don't think adamant is one of those kinds of words that has a comparative. You can't be slightly adamant. When he told me that, I was a little bit adamant. Then after I thought about it, I got a little bit more adamant. She's
It's built in.
Very adamant, right? That we stick to the fact that we need to get the final rules so we'll understand exactly what it is that we need to do. For her to understand exactly what it is that she's going to need to do, that's a tall order. I'm pretty adamant when I say that. The governor added, I have just been talking to various other states, and other states are doing the same thing. They're not spending or distributing the ARP until they see the final rules because of experience and learning from the CARES Act. The governor also emphasized that from the very beginning, how do you say that? From the very beginning? What's the common way of saying that?
From the get-go.
From the get-go, her administration has been given back to the hands of the people any federal monies that they were given to Guam, So, it's good that she inserts the word, as she's speaking to the reporter here, right? Yeah. Otherwise, the reporter may just sit there with a dumb look on his face, right?
Well, it sets him up to know that she's about to talk about herself.
Yeah. So, this RISE Act politicizing, I think, is so narrow because they're making it sound like it's the only source of help to our people of Guam. We've had close to $2 million that we already put back to the people of Guam, Leon Guerrero said. It was, and she also said, it was the least I could do. Well, what was it that Winston Churchill said about democracy? It's the worst form of government there is, except for all the others. Sometimes I've got a really good idea of what it is that he was talking about. Okay. Moving on to the next item on the card here, which is Melvin Borja versus Tall Tales. But I noticed that I've got a guest in the green room here. It's none other than... Oh, I wonder, it's Dr. McNinch. I wonder if he wants to talk about Bill 112. Good afternoon, Dr. McNinch. You don't want to talk about Bill 112, do you, even though you're a doctor?
Yeah. Happy Senator, happy I hope that they keep talking about Bill 112 because I think that in general, I think that there's a middle ground that everybody could find on that bill. But yeah, that wasn't the reason I was calling in today. I was calling in today because I heard that the Decolonization Commission had written some kind of statement about you, and I was looking online. I cannot find it online anywhere. I guess they published it as a press release. They didn't put it on their website. They didn't put it even on their Facebook.
Yeah, they didn't even send it to me, of all people.
That's not right. I mean, that's what I was going to call and ask is if you had a copy of it. I'm looking for a copy of it. I mean, they're a government commission. They're writing press releases. I would hope that in the future they would at least post their press releases or their comments about things that are policy oriented that are being said in public. At least let the public know what they're saying. I mean, I'm not trying to be overly critical of the Decolonization Commission.
You should be, Ron. You should be overly critical because you're absolutely right.
Well, I want to be appropriately critical.
All right.
And so I would like to see what they had to say because, and also I've heard that you might be getting into a discussion in the future about it. I look forward to that discussion. I think that, and this would be my 2 cents worth of advice for the Decolonization Commission. You should want people to talk about decolonization, even if you disagree with them, because that's what their job is. They should want people to have open discussions. You should want people to have contrasting views so that then there's more discussion. I just don't get it. Why?
Well, let me help you, Ron. What part of critical race theory do you not understand? Because that's exactly what we've got here. We've got hometown critical race theory, where if you offline, I'll tell you where to look. If you say things that are politically incorrect, you're going to get slammed on a personal basis. And Ray asked, when this thing started, are they going to cancel Bob Klitzkie? And that's what the kind of thing that we're looking at. So as far as they're putting out a press release, that's the favored means of communicating. They're apparently not interested in the public, because what they're interested in is meeting what they perhaps perceive as not favorable press in that arena. And it's got really nothing to do with the public. It's a form of jousting. So if you're jousting, you're going to stay out on a tournament field. You're not going to be riding around town dressed up like a knight, right, Ron?
Yeah. Well, Senator, one thing I'd encourage everyone to do is go take a look at the Guam legislature website, pull up this law from the 23rd Guam legislature. I can't remember the exact law number. I think it was 167. 167 was the law that created the Decolonization Commission. And if anybody simply reads the legislative history, this was just supposed to be one commission among several to help on the civic side. This was not supposed to be a singular, entity that basically takes over everything related to political status. We were supposed to have had a concurrent Commonwealth Status Commission at the same time operating separate from this commission. There are all kinds of promises that were made back in 1996, 97 that simply fell apart. They never followed up with any of them.
It wasn't a matter of disintegration. It was a matter of destruction. And my analysis is that the separatists took control of this, shoehorned us into the three possibilities, which is wrong, and took over the commission so that the separatist propaganda can be broadcast over what amounts to a government microphone, with the propagandist being on the government payroll. That's where we are. And I want to mention this one more time. When you look at the chapter on decolonization, it's chapter 21 of Title 1 of the Guam Code. Here's the title of that chapter: Commission on Decolonization for the Implementation and Exercise of Chamorro Self-Determination. That's why I started my remarks at the Rotary. Nobody's working on decolonization here, because decolonization and Chamorro self-determination are not synonyms.
Right. Well, there is one other thing, Senator, I think I always try to remind our public of and everything else. 1 GCA 17 still has, I believe, good law that has a Commonwealth Commission. And I think that we should have appointees to that commission, and there's nothing preventing anyone from doing Commonwealth-type activities. If everyone else is excluded, and again, however they want to do it, they can do it. But right now, if I understand it right, you or I are not eligible for 1 GCA 21, the commission on Chamorro
11 commissioners, all of whom have to be Chamorro. So it's the classic case of where they're pointing. They're pointing towards a government by Chamorros, of Chamorros, and for Chamorros. And if you're not, too bad. That's the thrust of the whole thing. I want to just mention something else while I've got you here, Ron, from the statute. The statute is a lie. The legislative findings say this: the United States, as a succeeding colonial power over the lands and people of Guam, acceded to and recognized the 1898 Treaty of Paris, that the political rights of the native inhabitants of Guam shall be protected, and their collective right to political self-determination is inalienable. That's what this statute says the Treaty of Paris says. Here's what the Treaty of Paris says: the civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress.
Which is consistent with the insular cases also.
Yeah, so you start out with a statute that's got a blatant lie in its legislative findings, and where are you going to go after that?
Sure.
And that's exactly where we are right now.
Well, I do hope that good conversations will continue to happen. I think that there's a lot of people who want to know what the sides of this discussion are. I don't think that there's been a balance on this discussion at all in our community. I don't think that the public has been provided an opportunity to hear alternatives to the kind of propagandistic things that have been said about this topic in our community, which is unfortunate. I think that people should be openly discussing these things. These should be healthy debates that people have. And
I'm the only one who's doing this. everybody else is just kind of going along with it. Well, you know, I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want people to say I was Chamorro Poasso or anything. So I don't like it very much, but I don't want to take a chance on making those people mad. So nobody's doing it except me.
Right. Here's another question I have, and I know that you know the answer, and I probably know the answer to also. But why in the world would the government waste so much money on a 15th Amendment case that's just plain ink on the Organic Act?
Well, and not only that, if they really had drunk this Kool-Aid, this independence Kool-Aid, the self-determination Kool-Aid, those are the arguments they should have made. They should have made their racial argument. They should have made their colonizer argument. And if they had lost, then they would at least know that those won't bear legal fruit. Or, you know, when you get to the Supreme Court, they never show that part of the Supreme Court proceedings where they go out behind the courthouse and with a dice cup and decide how the decisions are going to come about. But instead of doing that, they just tried to finesse it. They said, well, you know, it's really not an election, and it's not ripe, and on and on and on and on. So they spent money not even advocating the decolonization position. That's the interesting thing for me. But it was a waste of money.
Right. They argued these very kind of tangential aspects when they could have just went right to the core and asked the question. Here's one other thing, Senator, I was going to mention to everyone. If the government of Guam wants a real eye-opener, they should just, and because they love the United Nations, they should directly ask the United Nations what the United Nations thinks of the kind of process Guam has proposed for this. And I think they might get a real eye-opener in that answer, because I don't believe the United Nations really, even their most far out in the twilight zone countries that are in the United Nations would support the process and kind of setup that we've developed here. I think that probably they find it as an embarrassment almost, because the United Nations it's like a bowling alley. They have a lane, and none of the stuff we're doing puts a ball down the lane that functions within the United Nations. It's incredible.
Well, the beauty of the United Nations is they have a headquarters in New York, and you could justify staying at the Waldorf Astoria if you were on a government trip to the United Nations. But the actual accomplishments that we've ever made of sending anybody to the United Nations for any reason are somewhere down between slim and none. But it's a lot of fun for the folks that get to make the trip.
No, I think that travel is germane to some of these questions. Absolutely, Senator. I think that the travel is the thing that's pushing the inactivity also. That is, I don't think anybody wants an answer because of the travel.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks a lot for chiming in, Dr. McNinch, and we'll give you a pass on Bill 112 today, okay?
Yes, sir. And I did ask on the Decolonization Commission Facebook page, could they please post their comments about you? Because I don't want to read paraphrased comments from a media site. I would like to really know.
Sure. Understood.
Yes, sir. Hey, have a great day, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Ron. So long.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we go. We're heading on the. We're about 5 minutes from the big halftime show. I'm going to start the next item on the card and pick it up after the big halftime show. It's titled Melvin Wonpat versus Tall Tales. Melvin Wonpat, if you didn't know it, is the genius behind the Chamorro Independence Commission, and he is as pro-independence as anybody you'll find. Now, I got to lay a foundation here for this, and I'm going to say something nice about a news turkey here, Joe Titano, who calls him Joe Titano II. So when I first saw that, I said, I'll bet he's got a good jump shot. And I'll bet he's a heck of a marathoner, too, because Joe Titano, I know, was really a great basketball player and a good marathoner. But I found out that, no, it's just, perhaps the two is an affectation. Because, you know, the way the rules work, I don't know if Joe knows this, but if you start out with somebody, someone named Jim Smith, right? He is Jim Smith. His son would be Jim Smith Jr. Jim Smith Jr.'s son would be Jim Smith III, not Jim Smith II. The only way you can have those two Roman numerals behind your name, the second, would be if you're Joe Titano or if you're a king, King Charles II or something like that. Other than that, it doesn't fit into the rules of the nomenclature.
Or maybe you're one of George Foreman's kids.
Is he
all named George?
Are they?
All of them.
Well, and then Alberto Cristobal Lamarena got all the way up to 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's prolific.
Yeah, I think the judge is number 3. And there's a 5 out there somewhere running around. I think the father was a basketball fan.
Or an attorney.
Yeah.
Pled the 5th.
Yeah. one of those. Yeah. So so Jack Haddock III, as an example, if they followed the rules, Jack Haddock III's father is Jack Haddock Jr., whose father's name is Jack Haddock, right? And if Jack Haddock had a son and wanted to continue the tradition, he would be the 4th. Yeah. Okay, so this is the article that ran on the 23rd. I'll just pick it up at the key part here. On Guam, this is what they're saying, reporting what I said. On Guam, proponents of critical race theory take issues from the past out of context by applying the ethics, manners, and morals of today, according to Klitzkie. The result is, he stated, was usually the conclusion that the U.S. was hopelessly, systemically racist. That was the end of the report on what I said. The next sentence reads like this. The chairman of the Commission on Decolonization's Independence Task Force, Michael Bavakwa, took a different stance. Just that one sentence. So I commented on it.
That was the original.
Yeah, that was the original article. And I said, man, that reporter, Joe Titano, just proved exactly what I accused the media of at the Rotary, that they snuck that in there to show their bias. So I sent a letter to Joe Titano saying, I sent the article and I highlighted that line, and I said, how did this get in here? I mentioned this before. Joe Titano said that was an editor's mistake. He cut out, an important part of they cut out an important part of the story. Well, if you looked at the placement of that story in the hard copy, they squeezed it in on a single column on the right-hand side of the page, and I suspect that the size of the news hole meant they had to cut something. So they cut out the attribution of Bavakwa's remarks, which, if they had done that, if they said call up if they reached out to Michael Bavacqua and said, "Hey, Bavacqua, Klitzkie said something about you at the Rotary. Do you want to comment?" Let me come back to this after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Ending a U.S. combat role. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. President Biden announcing Monday U.S. troops in Iraq will formally stop conducting military missions by the end of the year.
But context is important here. There are about 2,500 U.S. troops currently in Iraq, and they basically halted all combat operations in April. And since Biden has taken office, the U.S. military has only carried out 2 airstrikes, and the only military action ordered by President Biden has involved striking targets on the Syria-Iraq border, from which Iranian-backed Shia militias were arranging attacks on U.S. troops who have been living on Iraqi military bases.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon reports the change coming at the request of Iraq's Foreign Minister al-Kadhimi in talks with the president at the White House. The Veterans Administration announcing all of its patient care employees must get vaccinated against the coronavirus, becoming the first federal agency to issue a vaccine mandate. Employees who resist could be removed from their jobs. And city workers in New York are being given a vaccine ultimatum.
The entire city workforce will be mandated under the COVID safety mandate to either get vaccinated, which is far preferable, or get tested once a week.
Mayor Bill de Blasio says there will be consequences for workers who do not comply. California mandating all of its state workers get vaccinated or undergo weekly tests as well. Former Wyoming Senator Mike Enzi has died. He'd suffered a broken neck Friday in an accident while riding his bike. He was 77. Former California Senator Barbara Boxer said to be shaken but unhurt after being assaulted and robbed on Oakland's waterfront Monday by a mugger who knocked her down and took her cell phone.
I just said, "How can you do this to a grandmother? I want to call my grandkids. Why are you doing this?" And he could care less and got in the car and they sped away.
America is listening to Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The big infrastructure bill drag on in the Senate.
Hang-ups remain over spending levels for things like public transit and pay-for provisions in new spending. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is urging quick action.
It's time for everyone to get to yes.
Schumer is threatening a weekend session to pass a measure this week and challenging Republicans to ignore former President Trump's opposition to a deal before the midterm elections.
But that's only a recipe for obstruction and gridlock.
A procedural motion to begin debate will need 60 votes in the Senate. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The House Select Committee on the January riot at the Capitol building holds its first hearing today with testimony from some law enforcement. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy continues to call the committee a sham. The 2 Republican members handpicked by the Speaker after she rejected 2 of his choices. Cuba, which 2 weeks ago saw huge anti-government protests, now reporting its embassy in Paris has been attacked with Molotov cocktails or small fire bombs. A popular ice cream manufacturer manufacturer facing more potential financial fallout from a political stance.
Ben & Jerry's caused quite an uproar with its recent announcement of not renewing a franchise agreement for a distributor in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, claiming Israeli settlement activity to be inconsistent with its company's values. Now the religious authority that provides kosher certification for Ben & Jerry's outside of Israel says in a letter the issue is creating a volatile situation. The letter from Huff K of Teaneck, New Jersey states that while they will fulfill their contractual obligations, they will use their influence to make sure an anti-Israel policy never becomes implemented. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Britney Spears' new attorney has asked the court to remove her father as her conservator and replace him with a professional accountant. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Mescla, read all about it. Check out Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tucumán for lunch. Serving up some savory seafood specials such as spicy garlic shrimp, candied salmon, or better yet the local favorite, snapper or shrimp escabeche. Available only during lunch hours. Make sure to come down and try these tasty specials and more. Call 969-2652 for more info or to make a reservation. Located at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán, Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Pastrami is back at Subway. Pepper-crusted beef layered with crispy pickles, mustard, and melted provolone cheese. Nothing comes close to the pleasure of sinking your teeth into that chewy, juicy, well-seasoned pastrami. It's happiness in a sub. Head down to the nearest Subway restaurant and satisfy your craving for the deli perfection that is pastrami. Subway. Eat fresh. Pastrami sub is available to all Subway locations on Guam and Saipan, including NCS for a limited time only.
Okay, so another great halftime show here on Tall Tales, something we've become quite accustomed to, actually. And now we're back to Melvin Borah versus Tall Tales, and I laid the foundation for this before the halftime break when I read Joe Titano's first article, which appeared he was being quite biased by slipping a Michael Bavacqua sentence into his news story without explanation or attribution, as though it were one of those facts that everyone understands without having any necessity for the validation thereof. Something like the Mississippi River flows into the Gulf of Mexico. You don't have to say, according to famous geographer Jack McClukenbach, the Mississippi River flows into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's exactly the same tenor that it had when it was snuck into the news story dealing with my speech at the Rotary. The chairman of the Commission on Decolonization's Independent Task Force, Michael Bavacqua, took a different stance.
Just take our word for it.
Exactly. But Joe Titano explained this was a mistake. He corrected the article online, and I went and I got that, and I laid it out yesterday, showed that he actually did correct it. But, of course, the harm's already been done. It ran in the hard copy, it ran in the e-edition, and it will always be in the e-edition, and it will always be in the hard copy. So then the next thing that comes along is the Commission on Writing Letters, or excuse me, the Commission on Press Releases comes along, as so eloquently criticized by Ron McNash. You know, if you're a public agency, you don't just send out press releases. You let the people that theoretically are your bosses know what you're doing. But that doesn't apply to the Commission on Chamorro Independence. So I spent some time on that yesterday, on the Commission's press release yesterday that was somewhat critical of me, probably not as critical as it could have been.
Just at the title?
Yeah. Klitzkie, Commission, Klitzkie misleading, uninformed on decolonization. And then the first thing they do, of course, is agree with me on my take on decolonization.
It was awesome.
Yeah. So here's how Joe Titano's latest story, which ran in this morning's Daily News, reads, former judge and Senator Robert Klitzkie was, quote, misleading and, quote, uninformed in a talk he gave to the Rotary Club of Guam, according to the Commission on Decolonization. Now, all 11 of them got together and put together that press release, I'm sure. It was a properly called and noticed meeting, hotly debated before they finally came out. It made the legislature look like a Cub Scout meeting, right, by the time they got done. No. Last week, Klitzkie railed against local media outlets. That's true. Last week, Klitzkie railed against local media outlets and the commission for gaslighting the public by pushing the idea that political self-determination for Chamorros was the same as decolonization for Guam. Decolonization affected more than just native inhabitants of the island, he said. That's absolutely true. Well, the two concepts were not synonymous, the commission said in the release, after saying that I didn't understand what it meant. There was a continual withholding of political choice for Chamorro. So the release really doesn't do much about what I said. It just goes off on the same old propaganda pitch. There was a continual withholding of political choice for Chamorros. Quote, self-determination is the Chamorro people's express will via a plebiscite of what type of truly self-government status they want for their island. Truly self-governing status, not falsely self-governing status. They want for their island. It's not our island or our people or the people's island. Now I have to just stand up here and object very strenuously if the Chamorro Independence Commission under Melvin Wadpat is saying it's the Chamorro's island. I own a chunk of land up in Jigo. It's paid for. I paid for the whole thing. I even have a certificate, a title for it. And don't even think that that's your land. It's my land. But of course, this their island thing is a form of what has taken place in American politics from time to time. I would give you the Know Nothing Party. And the Know Nothing Party were characterized in American politics. Now, you got to be careful of this word, and I'll explain it. The American Know Nothing Party were characterized as nativists. Now, every one of the independentistas out there saying, yeah, like us, we're natives, we're indigenous. That ain't what it means. In American politics, a nativist is one who is against extensive, or even perhaps even slight immigration. Being a nativist is being anti-immigrant. So the know-nothings reached their height at somewhere in the middle of the 19th century, when the thinking was we're allowing too many people from Europe into this country. We got to turn it off. That was the Know-Nothing Party. These were nativists. Now, it's got nothing to do with indigenous, etc., although I'm sure everybody knows better than I do about this, right? Well, I'm a native. How can you tell me what I am?
Well, we'll find out if there's a press release tomorrow.
Exactly. So this sentence here is a classic nativist sentence. Once again, nothing to do with indigenous, etc. It's a xenophobic type mental process. Xenophobic means fear of foreigners. So this is definitely a xenophobic line when they say, when Melvin Wanpad says decolonization, as you were, decolonization, wait a minute, back up a second here. Self-determination is the Chamorro peoples expressed via plebiscite of what type of truly self-governing status they want for their island. So they, we got this one here that we got 170,000 people living on. That's ours. And then the Chamorros have another one somewhere else, apparently, their island. But it's a classic example, a subtle but classic example of nativism and xenophobia. We got to keep the foreigners out. We were here first. We will make the decisions, not you newcomers. And then this is really telling here. Decolonization then occurs after that vote. First, you find out what it is that Chamorros want after shoehorning the vote into 3 of the 5 possibilities, right? More than likely coming up with independence, because that's the only one that's possible. And then after that, decolonization then occurs after the vote, when transitions to a political status with true self-governance. So first the process goes like this. First we jimmy up the 3 choices, and we say the only people that can vote on it are Chamorros, and we make sure that they vote for independence. After they've decided that, then we go to decolonization, which means independence, because that's what the Chamorros want. This is what's going on here, folks. It's very cleverly worded to conceal what the actual intent is, but that's what it's really going on. So the real intent is the Chamocracy, a government of by Chamorros, of Chamorros, for Chamorros. And you'll see when you get to the rest of this release, everybody else inconsequential. Collateral damage. The Commission's statement pointed to several continuing inequities in political status. Territorial clause and insular cases which determine that only certain parts of the Constitution are extended to the citizens of the territories. Yeah, by not extending the revenue clauses, we're cheated out of our right to pay federal income tax. I'm just so angry about that. Why can't I pay federal income tax? Next item, the Jones Act, which raises costs of goods in territories. Well, it raises costs of goods anywhere where there's coastwise shipping. The only status that's currently under discussion that gets us out from the Jones Act is if Guam is independent, because there'd be no restriction on foreign ships sailing to Guam from the U.S. mainland. And then the lack of a voice for the island in negotiation that affect us. Well, which state has a voice in decisions that affect that state? None. So this is smoke and mirrors, these 3 items here. And they go on to say they also took issue with Klitzkie's calling independence advocates separatists. Well, if you want independence, isn't that what you want to do? Don't you want to separate from the United States? And stated that it was not what decolonization was about. Now, I think I explained what decolonization is about. And for them, it's tomorrow's self-determination, nothing more, nothing less. The political status quo, which Klitzkie was in favor of, withheld the island's political, economic, and cultural development. The group said, yeah, the current status really hurts our economic development. Dumping in $2 billion into our economy here during the time when we're flat on our ass, that really hurt our economy, right? And political, I mean, bringing the rule of law to an island where it had never existed before.
And isn't the governor talking to the State Department in opening up H-2 workers so that they can finish the military buildup on Guam?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, but see what they're saying here, the lack of voice for the island in negotiations that affect us, like we should be sitting in with the compact negotiations, like Hawaii is, like Hawaii has a representative. The unincorporated territory status of Guam contradicts the principles of the U.S. Constitution, the commission wrote, adding that the status was one of ownership, not incorporation into the U.S. Well, it's a nice sounding emotional ploy, but it does not contradict the U.S. Constitution. You know what the Constitution says by reading it, not by telling people what you think it ought to mean. And here's what the Constitution says. It's the actual words of the Constitution. This is Article 4, Section 3. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory belonging to the United States. Period. So the fact that Guam is a territory is not inconsistent with the Constitution. And you American history buffs will remember that the United States had a territory before the U.S. Constitution was enacted. The Northwest Territory, yeah. A place where I finally wound up living. The Northwest Territory, Indiana, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, and a little bit of Minnesota was the Northwest Territory, and that came along before we had a U.S. Constitution. Strangely believe it. My stack just went on the blink, Jose.
You have somebody named Ken on line 1 who wants to discuss the subject.
Okay, let me go with Ken. Good afternoon, Ken.
Morning, Bob, or afternoon, Bob.
Howdy.
My favorite part of that whole release is where they talk about how Guam is one of 17 regions that has been denied self-governing opportunities. So what is Adelu? What are the legislature? Chopped cheese?
Of course, yeah.
You know, and we have representation. He may not have a vote, but we have representation in Washington. And as we have seen over the last few years, he's been very effective at representing the people of Guam.
And you know what, Ron? Our separatist former congressman, Robert Underwood, and when asked, how does it affect you when you don't have a vote, when you want to get things done in Congress? And he says, I can work around it. He says, getting things done in Congress is primarily a matter of relationships. So what we have is we have a member of Congress who has a house, has an office in the Rayburn office building, just like everybody else's, all the trimmings, all of the trappings, all of the funding. That representative rides the little streetcar from the office building to the Capitol like everybody else, debates on the floor, votes in committee, and has a great deal of authority, especially because of the committee vote, because he can log roll. I've compared that with representation in Oceanside, which is about the same number of people of Guam. They got a share of congressman with about 400,000 other people. He doesn't pay any more attention to them than he does to his other constituents. And we get to keep all the federal tax money, and they don't. So,
yeah, there was a couple of other things that were interesting. The Decolonization Committee, I think in 2019, they held the Business Economic Forum, and every single one of the panelists, which were all prominent businessmen, preferred status quo or statehood to any other alternative, much to the chagrin of the host of the event. And another thing, all these Guam politicians, if you recall back in 2014 and 2016, Michael St. was trying to introduce, trying to delink from the U.S. IRS. And business people and politicians alike said Guam isn't ready. We can't trust our people to run a tax system effectively. And yet the same people who are running around screaming that we need to become our own. Oh, don't forget the fact that almost 40% of government in Guam's budget before COVID was federal.
True enough.
You know? So if we couldn't survive before COVID on our own, and remember, the COVID was the only thing that saved this administration from going into the red big time, because as I recall, coming up to the end in the first couple of months of FY 2020, they were already $50 million off track. So if it wasn't for COVID, this administration would have collapsed financially.
True.
So, yeah, that whole thing, the only thing I see this whole exercise is as an excuse to give politically well-connected insiders six-figure jobs and quarterly trips to New York City where they can take in the latest Broadway, well, used to be able to take in the latest Broadway plays and fine dining after spending 5 minutes pleading for mercy from the UN.
Yeah, that's certainly a large part of it, but there's a sinister part of it too, Ron, and that is that the tactics of critical race theory are very similar to the tactics that the separatists use. And my analysis is that mature folks are not very susceptible to this stuff, but young people are. We've got people like Julian Uggan writing textbooks for high school students. I can see some real dangerous days ahead of us here if we don't all speak up like you're doing about the lunacy of this whole independence separatist movement, and the fact that Melvin Wanpad and a few others have been able to do this with our money.
Yeah, that's always been a problem. My favorite one, though, is, with all this brouhaha about being oppressed and everything, they wanted to send a delegation to Spain to embrace the Spanish royalty and invite a delegation to come to Guam to celebrate the 550th, landing of Magellan. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So how can, it just goes back to the lack of credibility on the Decolonization Commission, because, I've pointed out the obvious legal flaw, and this is based on precedent. Puerto Rico tried 3 times to petition Congress to consider a political status change, and the first 2 times it was denied because they didn't include status quo as one of the options. And then the third time they included status quo, but they restricted voting. And what are we trying to do here? We're trying to craft a political status process that eliminates status quo and restricts voting. So I don't think it's going to go very far. And the part that's most frustrating, we're going to end up spending millions of taxpayer dollars defending the lawsuits that are going to come out of this lunacy. I mean, look at the Dave Davis situation. What did that cost taxpayers? I think taxpayers were on the hook for about $2 to $3 million in legal fees over the course of that battle. And here we are getting ready to do the same thing again. So obviously we didn't, our politicians, well, the people haven't learned, because politicians were the ones that got us into the mess on the Davis lawsuit, and now they're trying to do the same thing with this process that they're crafting. And it doesn't mean anything other than it's going to generate a lot of work for attorneys at the end of the day.
Well, anything that tends to generate fees for lawyers can't be all bad.
Well, I'm sure that Julian Uggen would agree with you, and he's probably ready to stand up for $350 to $500 an hour and take up the cause that he knows will, even though it may go down in glorious defeat, it may take years and a couple Mercedes and a new house on Nimitz Hill in the process.
Well, thanks.
That's being cynical.
Thanks a lot for chiming in on this one, Ken. Good talking to you.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay, so we got a break coming up here, and maybe Jose can fix my machine here so I can see some Facebook comments. We'll be back in just a minute.
To the greatest generation who endured the Japanese occupation, to those who risked their lives for our freedom, to those who continue to protect our freedom and keep our island safe, we thank you. To the people of Guam, our viewers and generous supporters, happy Liberation Day from PBS Guam KGTF Channel 12. Catch the three-part special program 77th Guam Liberation Village to Village We Are Survivors on demand on PBS Guam's YouTube page.
Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Diving and seeing our coral reef full of life.
I really love hiking the trails.
I really love going to the beach. The sunsets are amazing.
Your island needs you. Help preserve what makes our island home. Stop those who threaten our wildlife, plants, and environment. Install the free Toka app and report poaching, littering, burning, and other environmental crimes. Call 864-TOKA or install the free Toka app today. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Department of Agriculture, UOGC Grant, and Choice Broadcasting.
Okay, so here we are, back on the air with Tall Tales. I got just a little bit more here of this article that I want to go into, and then I will pick up Frenchie, who is patiently waiting here online. So the article goes on to say, the unincorporated territory status of Guam contradicts the principle of the U.S. Constitution. And I, just before the break, I said it does not contradict the principles of the U.S. Constitution. Then a little plea to emotion. In the moral and international, it is a moral and international obligation of the U.S. to support Chamorro self-determination if the country truly wished to be a beacon of freedom and democracy. Yeah, very, very colorful. And reckon with its colonial past. Now we get into the cultural racism. They said, and then at the end of the article, the subtitle is Klitzkie. Klitzkie said there are 170,000 people living on the island. Every one of those people is living in a colony. So if we're really serious about decolonization, are we only going to decolonize it for those who are going to be able to exercise this right of self-determination that the Commission highlights? And if that's the case, what happens to the others? Expendable, collateral damage.
Who's on first?
Yeah. Independence was the only actual option for self-determination, he stated, given that statehood was unlikely due to Guam's small population and revenue, and free association with the U.S. would require independence. Rather than spinning our wheels, the island could negotiate a more agreeable compact with the U.S., such as the one the CNMI enjoys, he stated. Well, to pat myself on the back, I said more in 4 paragraphs than the Commission did in their 2-page press release. But I cheated. I didn't put all the emotional appeals and gaslighting into mine. All right, let's see what Frenchie's got to say. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Robert. All rise.
There you go.
Yeah. So there is something that I noticed that is a little sneaky, and most people have not taken note of it, which is that 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration has invited the UN Human Rights Committee to come.
I saw it.
To come and audit what's wrong in the United States as far as racial inequities and so on. And I think it's also a sneaky way, and we're dealing with Democrats, so of course it is very sneaky. We might have a visit from the UN under the guise of that commission here on Guam. I wouldn't put it past Little Lou and all the higher expensive salary hands who are all milking the system here on Guam. And that would give them another drum to beat and to kind of, strike their chests in the self-righteousness in order to do that. And then we would end up in a position where we could become the next Nauru. And that's pretty scary. But I thought I wanted to mention that because I listened to Dr. McNich and also Ken earlier, and I don't think many people notice that, even though I think it's quite important because it's similar to what Obama did with the gun confiscation program of the UN and how they facilitated access for the UN into the United States to criticize the Second Amendment. And I think we're seeing something very similar and very sneaky and very unhealthy of inviting this gas factory, like de Gaulle called it, which is the United Nations, to come and tell us what's wrong with us. This is really a new form of masochism. So I wanted to bring that up, and I would suggest to Dr. McNich and everybody else that's interested on those topics to keep their eyes and ears open, because this could very well happen before we know it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a classic case of a commander calling in an infantry, as it were, an artillery strike on his own position, Frenchie.
Yeah, it's exactly what that is. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Thank you, Bob.
Well, thanks for alerting us to that. Yeah, Blinken, who is probably really aptly named, is the worst Blinken Secretary of State we've ever had. Yeah, he's invited the United Nations Commission on Human Rights to come in and check and see if we're treating African Americans correctly, if we're being racist, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite an undertaking. But is anybody surprised? You know, I mean, are there still people left in the United States who said, I voted for Joe and Kamala, and I'm really glad that I did? I just can't imagine anybody. I mean, as much as you could hate Trump with a purple passion.
You know, for a party that talks about gun control a lot,
yeah,
they sure shoot themselves in the foot all the time.
Don't they? Yeah.
I have a question back to this this article in the press release from the Commission on Decolonization.
Yeah.
Is there a fallacy in this statement saying that we're second-class citizens, in the sense that there is a good majority of Chamorros in the States already enjoying their U.S. citizenship, that will they be exempt or barred or omitted from any kind of vote?
I get a kick out of that. That used to be Neil Weir's mantra, you know. Should whether or not you're a second-class citizen depend on your zip code? Well, I'm going to tell you about the classes that we do have, and it's not what people think. But a citizen is a citizen is a citizen. And if you are a citizen, it's indelible. The only way you can stop being a citizen is going overseas to a U.S. consular office, filling out some papers, taking an oath, listening to a lecture, and signing up. Then you can stop being a United States citizen. Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy that we think shot Kennedy, tried to do it in Moscow. He wasn't able to do it. So it's not an easy thing to do. You cannot lose your citizen with one exception, and that is if you're a naturalized citizen and you falsified your naturalization application, you can be denaturalized. This happened to people who were participants in the Nazi activities during World War II, who lied about it, were found out, and were denaturalized and sent back to Germany. But other than that, once a citizen, always a citizen. And a citizen is a citizen is a citizen. It doesn't matter where you are, you have all of the rights and privileges of a United States citizen. If you are overseas and you have a problem overseas, you're entitled to the diplomatic protection of the nearest United States consulate. You're entitled to a passport. You're entitled to free movement throughout the United States, in and out of the United States.
I think that's the important thing to think about, is that we have free movement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now I know that the guy over there sitting there in the Easy Boys say, well, what about voting? You know, we don't get a chance to vote. Well, believe it or not, there's nothing in the United States Constitution that gives anybody the right to vote. I'll explain. And voting has not always been tied to citizenship. 1924 was the first presidential election in which no non-citizen voted. Up through 1920, non-citizens voted for president. Because if you look at the Constitution, the two are not tied together.
Up to 1920.
Up till 1920. And then it's not a matter of national law, it's a matter of state law. Because we all know everybody but the officials in the 6 battleground states know that the electors clause leaves it up to the states to determine how electors are chosen. Now, somebody is going to turn to the 15th Amendment and say, hey, Bob, there's that right to vote. And this is what it says. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or infringed by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. It's one of the negative rights in the Constitution. It doesn't say you have the right to vote. It says that if you do, it cannot be denied or abridged. So if there is an election, it can't be abridged because of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now, in 1876, the state of Colorado had 3 electors that it sent to the Electoral College. All 3 were chosen by the legislature of Colorado. So in 1876, you know who got to vote for president in Colorado? Nobody. So I won't go through the other amendments, but the other ones are all the same. If there is an election, it can't be denied because you're 18 years old. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says if you're a U.S. citizen, you get to vote.
That was somebody on the line made a point also that there have been like felons, not to say that we're comparable to felons here on Guam, but there are citizens
that are felons
that have been denied the right to vote.
Absolutely, and that once upon a time was basically the norm. Here on Guam, if you are an incarcerated felon, you cannot vote. Of course, the Democrats would like to move polling places inside the prisons because they know that most of the prisoners are Democrats. So anyhow, there is no constitutional right to vote. There are constitutional provisions not prohibiting the vote. Even the much vaunted right of women to vote, which reads like this: the right of citizens to vote. The word women doesn't even appear in the 19th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Same principle. It's a negative right. But you won't find that provision in the Constitution that says every American citizen has a right to vote except for us because we're second-class citizens. We're not second-class citizens. And I'll go a little farther. If you really want to be technical, I wrote a letter to the Post one time saying, Confessions of a Third-Class Citizen, because they came out with a cockamamie theory about the insular cases and citizenship. And I pointed out that if a person is born on Guam, when he dies, when they die, their heirs do not pay federal death tax on any of their assets located anywhere in the world except in the 50 states. Yeah. If you're born on Guam. If you're like me, you're born in Wisconsin, you come over here. If I had assets anywhere else in the world, the federal death tax would apply. So in that respect, if you're born on Guam, you're a first-class citizen. I'm a second-class citizen.
So there is a voting tax. It's just retroactive.
Yeah. So then you go one step farther, and an even higher class than people born on Guam are citizens of Northern Mariana's descent, because they're entitled to that same death tax exemption, right? Their heirs are. Plus, under the covenant, they can hold fee simple title to the Northern Mariana Islands. I can't. That makes me a third-class citizen. That doesn't even get into local laws that said that because I'm not Chamorro, I can't have any of the free rentals on the Chamorro Land Trust. And the law is still on the books that says I can't vote in these political status elections because I'm not Chamorro. So we have second-class citizens, but they're not the folks born on Guam. They're not the Chamorros. Let's make it real clear. Okay.
You know, you're making some people fume right now and possibly write another press release.
Probably. Well, let's hope so, because, you know, they make such excellent talk radio.
Absolutely.
Okay, I got somebody on the line here.
R. Keith is on the line.
Okay, my computer is back alive, but I can't get into it. Okay, R. Keith, what can you tell me, R. Keith?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Has there ever been a public debate on this subject where these snake oil salesmen and racists actually get to be confronted with facts and information contrary to their blather?
No, there hasn't been, and I mentioned a little earlier that people are reluctant to do that because they think that by doing that it would be branded anti-Chamorro. In other words, if you don't swallow all of the Chamorro propaganda, even if you choke on it, that people are afraid there'd be criticism. Oh, did Johnny talk to Chamorro? See Bob, nay? And of course, it's not the case at all. So as far as I know, I'm the only one who's ever come out in anything that looks like a forum and disputed the state propaganda that comes out of that commission.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
So they essentially have taxpayer-paid microphones, and everyone else is too kowtowed into place. That's sad.
That's
really sad. Might I suggest that, if and when, or not if, but when the time comes and some of these people, Bevilacqua and Racist Bob, Dr. Ray's uncle, pass on, that we, the audience of the Tall Tales community, show up and pay our respects, and when it comes time to inter the body, we offer bags of kitty litter to cover it up, like you use kitty litter for.
Keith, that's pretty harsh even for me. Those kind of remarks are my job, but go on.
Okay. Did you hear that a couple of those runaway Texas Democrats have returned? A couple of them have returned to the state.
I understand they've got extremely hard feelings because the president won't entertain them. You would have thought he would have entertained them like heroes.
Did you see the photo of them in their chartered private jet?
Maskless.
With a case of Miller Lite.
Yeah. Well, at least...
Well, they apparently returned with 6 cases of Corona.
Well, that figures. If they're drinking Miller Lite, at least they got taste for good beer. But they are into the critical race theory, identity politics. So Corona would go down much more easily, right?
I was actually making a play on words there.
Oh, okay. Corona, you got it.
6 of them have.
See, we don't call it Corona here until if you'd have said.
Oh, that's right.
If there were a brand of beer named Wuhan virus, I'd have got it immediately.
You're right. Okay, well, this one fell flat. I'll try better next time.
Good talking to you, R. Keith.
Take care.
All right. So that's R. Keith. I've only got about 8 minutes to go, and I've got a piece here on Candid versus Mattson that I don't think I'm going to be able to finish, but since I can't get at my Facebook comments, I probably will go to Churchill Downs, hoping that another Joe or R. Carl will call in and help me get down the home stretch.
Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
To the greatest generation who endured the Japanese occupation, To those who risk their lives for our freedom, to those who continue to protect our freedom and keep our island safe, we thank you. To the people of Guam, our viewers and generous supporters, happy Liberation Day from PBS Guam KGTF Channel 12. Catch the 3-part special program 77th Guam Liberation Village to Village We Are Survivors on demand on PBS Guam's YouTube page.
Special thanks to Choice Broadcasting.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs. We got about 5 more minutes to go here to the end of the show today. And I mentioned that I was hoping the most dangerous man in the room, or perhaps another joke, would call and help me get to the home stretch here. And I should have mentioned Drive-Through Jack. Yeah, because Drive-Through Jack, whatever happened to Drive-Through Jack? Does he ever call Ray's show, Jose?
I haven't heard in a while either. Yeah.
If anybody knows Drive-Through Jack, suggest that he call Tall Tales, because at the end of the show, I will get back to a question that he posed. He asked the question, is there still mutual consent between the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas and the U.S. government? And I said, no, there's no mutual consent. Well, I did some research, and I'm going to state this, that is there a mutual consent provision between the Northern Marianas and the United States? The answer is sort of, kind of. But I don't want to go through it twice, so I'd like to go through it with Drive-Through Jack, since he's the one who raised the question. So Drive-Through Jack, if you're out there, or tailgaters, if you know Drive-Through Jack, hey, Jack, call Bob at the end of the show, and he'll tell you about mutual consent and the CNMI. Okay, so this is the end of the show here, Candid versus Mattson. And I got to hand it to Troy. They put out some really good stuff on his website, Candid News. He's got some real reporters. He touches the stuff that others don't touch on, because it's too hot, it's too controversial, etc., and he doesn't pull his punches. And then he gets into other stuff that I think it's just too hard for the Daily News and the Post, because they'd actually have to do some research and thinking and actually write a really interesting news story. And Troy does that, and today is no exception. He writes about Mattson's shipping chokehold on the economies and political powerhouses of the Pacific. And he's talking about the famous Jones Act. He says Mattson's shipping chokehold on the economies and political powerhouses of the Pacific has caused an economy of political courage, juice in the island, a scarcity of conscience. No reasonable and educated policymaker who is honest with himself or herself, he doesn't even use woke language, another tribute to Troy, actually believe the century-old federal law that protects shipping companies and drives up all our costs in the islands is a good law. Yet from the Mariana Islands, the islands of Hawaii, a Category 5 storm happens more often than a politician who takes a stance against the Jones Act or otherwise challenges Matson shipping. Matson is a Hawaii-based multi-million-dollar shipping corporation that enjoys the support of all but one of Hawaii's congressional delegation and most of its local politicians. Campaign contributions talk in that state. It's the same language spoken to Guam's politicians whose tongues have been caught by a cat. What's the matter, Tello? Cat got your tongue? Well, just don't mention the cat's name. Yeah. Let's see. As Matson tries to exile its only competitor in the Guam trade, APL. The Guam trade involves many more people and islands than Guam. Well, I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. It's not exciting, but it's extremely important and the kind of thing that Tall Tales needs to keep beating on until we get somewhere with it. So, see you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3. FM and 104.3 HD3.
Or else, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Veterans Administration becoming the first federal agency to order all of its healthcare employees to get the coronavirus vaccine.
USA Today says nearly 80% of VA employees are already vaccinated. That's about 300,000 staffers. But anyone refusing the vaccine could face penalties, including possible removal. The VA rule issued as the American Medical Association and dozens of other healthcare groups sent out a letter calling for all healthcare facilities to require workers get the shot.
Fox's Jill Nato, the state of California, to require all of its employees to get the shot as well.
We're at a point in this epidemic, this pandemic, where choice, individuals' choice not to get vaccinated is now impacting the rest of us in a profound and devastating and deadly way.
Governor Gavin Newsom says employees who are not vaccinated will have to be tested weekly. The mayor of St. Louis has ordered everyone 5 years and older, vaccinated or not, to wear masks in indoor public places and on public transit. The state's attorney general has filed suit to try and block the mayor's order. President Biden, in a joint news conference with Iraqi Prime Minister al-Kadhimi, has announced the U.S. will end its combat mission in Iraq by the end of this year. The number of American troops stationed there will remain the same, but their role will switch to training and advising Iraqi forces. The first person to be charged under the Beijing-authored national security law in Hong Kong has been found guilty of inciting secession and terrorism for driving his motorcycle into a group of police officers. The 24-year-old man is facing life in prison. Wall Street Monday, all three major indices closing at record highs, but early morning Dow futures are trading more than 200 points lower. America is listening to Fox News.
Hey, it's Brett Larson, inviting you to download and listen to the new daily Fox on Tech podcast. There's part of a colorful late 90s iMac on Mars. It's an idea that seems a lot like Kickstarter, called Build It. This isn't the first time we've heard about North Korea hackers trying to get a leg up on COVID-19, a range that was used for satellite TV service in the 70s. Get the latest trends in technology, cybersecurity alerts, and gadget news daily. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now.
A recently retired U.S. Senator has died. Mike Enzi spent years in government service as the mayor of Gillette, Wyoming, then in both houses of the state's legislature. He was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1996 and served 4 terms before retiring this past January with some advice for a badly divided Senate.
It turns out that when we work together, we can create a better bill than when we just try to do it alone or force others to accept our ideas.
He had suffered a broken neck while riding his bike near his home in Wyoming on Friday. Former Senator Mike Enzi was 77. The 98th and last victim of the Surfside, Florida condominium building collapse has been identified. Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava praising everyone who helped in the largest non-hurricane disaster response in state history.
Our community and the world are deeply grateful to the first responders, especially the men and women of the Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department, Miami-Dade Police Department, and all the local fire departments who are an integral part of this operation.
A skydiving excursion in New York State has ended tragically.
A 59-year-old woman plummeted to her death after what's being called a parachute malfunction during a skydiving trip in Westford, New York, about 60 miles west of Albany. Karen Bernard's brother confirmed the grim apparent accident on social media, saying his sister from Wildwood, Florida, was doing what she loved. Police have given few details about the